Section 12, Understanding Closing Costs Almost to the Finish Line. Throughout this course, we followed the buyer's journey from the very first conversation with a lender to obtaining a pre-approval, navigating underwriting, and avoiding common financing pitfalls. Now there is just one final step before the buyer receives the keys: closing. For many first-time buyers, this is also the moment when they discover that purchasing a home involves more than just the down payment. One of the most common questions buyers ask is, how much money do I need to bring to closing? The answer depends on several factors, but one thing is always true. Buyers should understand closing costs long before closing day arrives. Helping your clients prepare for these expenses is one of the best ways to reduce surprises and keep the transaction moving smoothly. What are closing costs? Closing costs are the various expenses associated with completing a real estate transaction. Some of these costs are related to the mortgage loan, while others are associated with escrow, title services, recording fees, inspections, prepaid expenses, and other services required to complete the purchase. Unlike the down payment, which represents the buyer's investment in the property, closing costs are the expenses necessary to complete the transaction and transfer ownership. The exact amount will vary depending on the purchase price, loan program, lender, and negotiated contract terms. For that reason, buyers should never rely on estimates from friends or internet calculators. Their lender will provide the most accurate estimate based on their specific loan. Understanding the difference. One area where many buyers become confused is the difference between earnest money, the down payment, and closing costs. Although all three involve money paid by the buyer, they serve very different purposes. Earnest money demonstrates the buyer's good faith commitment to the contract and is generally applied toward the buyer's funds due at closing. The down payment represents the buyer's financial investment in the property. Closing costs are the expenses associated with completing the transaction. Helping buyers understand these differences early makes the entire process much less intimidating. Arizona broker tip. One of the easiest ways to prepare buyers is to simply ask, have you talked with your lender about your estimated cash needed to close? That question often starts one of the most valuable conversations of the entire transaction. Common closing costs. Although every transaction is different, buyers commonly encounter expenses such as loan origination charges, appraisal fees, title and escrow charges, recording fees, homeowners insurance premiums, prepaid property taxes and interest, home inspection costs, HOA-related fees when applicable. Some of these expenses are paid before closing, while others appear on the closing disclosure provided by the lender. The important thing for buyers to understand is that these costs are a normal part of purchasing a home and should be included in their overall financial planning. Real-world example. Michael and Jennifer carefully saved enough money for a 10% down payment on their new home. They were excited to learn they qualified for financing and assumed they were financially ready to close. A few weeks before closing, their lender reviewed the estimated closing disclosure with them. In addition to their down payment, they also needed funds for prepaid homeowners insurance, escrow reserves, appraisal costs, and several other closing expenses. Fortunately, their real estate agent had discussed these costs during their first buyer consultation. Because they had planned ahead, the additional expenses did not create unnecessary stress or delay the closing. Sometimes, the best service an agent provides is helping buyers avoid surprises. Reviewing the closing disclosure. Federal law requires lenders to provide buyers with a closing disclosure before the transaction is finalized. This document summarizes the final loan terms and itemizes the costs associated with the purchase. Encourage your buyers to review the closing disclosure carefully and ask questions if they do not understand a particular charge. Although you can explain the general purpose of many line items, questions involving loan fees, interest calculations, taxes, or legal matters should always be directed to the appropriate professional. Helping buyers review this document before closing often prevents confusion at the signing appointment. Your role as the real estate professional. One of your responsibilities is making sure buyers understand that closing costs are a normal part of every real estate transaction. You should introduce the concept early, encourage buyers to discuss estimated costs with their lender, and remind them that final figures may change slightly as the transaction progresses. Your role is not to calculate lender fees or provide legal or tax advice. Instead, you help buyers understand the process, communicate with the lender and escrow officer, and ensure they know what to expect before arriving at the closing table. Contract law connection. The Arizona Residential Resale Real Estate Purchase Contract identifies many of the costs and responsibilities that may be allocated between the buyer and seller. Because many of these expenses are negotiable, real estate professionals should review the contract carefully with their clients so they understand their financial obligations before signing. Helping buyers prepare for closing costs supports informed decision making, reduces misunderstandings, and helps ensure a successful closing.